Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consol, your host. Two quick things before introducing you to my guest. First, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast by clicking on the follow button and also clicking on the bell icon so you are alerted to each new edition of the program. Second, in addition to being the producer of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I've written 4 books, 3 novels, and 1 short story collection. In the episode notes, you will find a short link to my Amazon page and all 4 of those titles. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Kate McKean, literary agent at the Howard Morhaim Literary Agency in Brooklyn, New York. She earned her master's degree in fiction writing at the University of Southern Mississippi. Her work has appeared in Poets and Writers, Electric Literature, and Catapult. She recently published her first book. The title is Right Through It, An Insider's Guide to Publishing and the Creative Life. And it's available basically everywhere, including on audible.com, where I bought my audio copy, which is read by Kate McKean herself. And I will tell you, it's just full of good information for authors, as well as, would-be agents. I'm sure there's people out there who think in terms of maybe being an agent. Well, you're going to learn a lot about being an agent from Kate, both from that book and our discussion today. Now, in addition to all that, she writes the Agents and Books newsletter at agentsandbooks.com. You can find her online as well at katemckean.com. She also recently wrote an article titled 5 Myths of Writing and Publishing Success. That article appeared in Writer's Digest. We will review those 5 myths with her, as well as discuss her new book, which, again, covers all kinds of ground of value to writers about agents and the publishing business. Kate McKean, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Congratulations on your new book. I devoured it. I got the audio edition, and I just devoured it because obviously, if you're interested in publishing, you want all that information, and I felt that you covered just a tremendous amount of ground. So
Thanks
congrats
so much.
on that. And also
Yeah.
the article, I actually wanted to start with the article and because you do list off 5 myths of writing and publishing success. And what I want to do is just list off the myths and then have you elaborate on each of them one by one. So myth number 1 is it's who you know. Myth number 2 is you have to be published to get published. Myth number 3, you have to be young. Myth number 4, you have to write to trends. And myth number 5, your book has to earn out to get another book deal. All of those are myths. And we're going to take them one by one with Kate McKean here. So let's start with it's who you know, Kate. I mean, you were already in the business as an agent, so it wasn't exactly, and it took you a while to get published, so it wasn't exactly like, hey, I'm connected, so I got a book. What's the overview on that when it's this misconception that it's who you know?
Yeah, I think there was a time in the publishing world a couple of decades ago or many, many years ago where you had to know somebody who knew an agent to even find out who agents were. And because agents didn't advertise, they did, we're talking the 20s and the 30s. And so that at that point in publishing, it was who you know, because you could not find this information anywhere. But that myth has persisted, of course, because it's easy for outsiders just to look at the publishing world from a remove and say, oh, well, that person just got a book deal because her best friend's second cousin's kindergarten teacher goes to pickleball with an agent's dog walker, or whatever.
Yeah, and my book's better than that, but I don't know the right people.
Right. And it's a really easy excuse that pushes the blame to somewhere else other than your book or yourself. And blame is a strong word, but we're all looking for reasons over why our publishing dreams are not being fulfilled. And a lot of times there just isn't a reason. So it's really easy to be like, oh, well, that person knows somebody. And I will say that the only easy thing about my position in publishing that gave me like a leg up is was the querying process, and in 2 ways. One was I knew how to write a query letter because I had written and read. I had read 40 billion of them by that point. And I also really knew the agents because I know my colleagues. And I, of course, I only queried four people because I had a really good idea of what I wanted in an agent and who I wanted to represent me. And I got really lucky that one of them said yes. So that was a clear privilege on my part, but it's just because I work in this industry and not because anybody was my BFF and did me a solid.
Right, right. And we will be talking about the all-important query letter with Kate after we go through these myths here. So myth number two is you have to be published to get published.
Yeah, a lot of people, freak out when they write their query letter and they're like, well, I don't have anything to write in that last paragraph that says, oh, I've been published in the New Yorker and the New York Times and blah, 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 and all these things. And so therefore, an agent's going to see that very short paragraph and then reject me. And that's just not true. It's definitely not true for fiction. I have absolutely signed up clients where that bio paragraph in a query says, I'm an accountant in Iowa. I like dogs. Here's my book. The most basic non-writerly bio you can think of. Now, in nonfiction, it does matter. And it doesn't necessarily matter that you've been published in specific places, but it matters that you have a platform or a following or a reason that readers are going to trust your book and know who you are, because that's how we buy nonfiction, as
Hmm.
just readers. So it is a little different there, but it isn't like, oh, we'll never get a novel book deal because you haven't published a short story in a big shiny magazine. That's just not true.
And I think it was my early 20s when I learned it when a book called Clan of the Cave Bear came out. It was a huge hit from a woman named Jean Owl. I believe I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but maybe not. And she really had not really done anything to my knowledge, but she wrote a book that was really well written, told a great story, and boom, she not only got published but turned out to be a bestseller. And she was not young, which is one of your myths here. You have to be young.
Yep. Yeah, it's another one of those kind of like it's who you know where it's really easy to look at those getting book deals and say, oh, well, that person, just graduated from the Iowa Writers Workshop and, this 22 and is pretty. And like these biases exist in the world. There is a young bias. There is an attractiveness bias. There is a racial bias. Everywhere in the world and publishing is included on that. But no one is looking for markers of your age and then saying yes or no based on that. I would never turn down a client because I'm like, well, you know, I wish they were 10 years younger. Like, it's just not important. And editors aren't coming to me and saying, we really love this book and think it could sell 1 million copies, but the author's too old. And I've never had a conversation like that ever in
Well,
publishing.
I think that maybe people are thinking if I'm 70 or 75 and I've written something, an agent might think, or a publishing company might think, but he or she doesn't have a whole lot in them because they're not going to be around for that many years. So, I don't think we might sign a 3 book deal and it never gets fulfilled because we all have an expiration date.
I I can't say that that's never happened as a conversation in genres where volume is the point, where, readers want a 3 book series. I've never heard of that happening, but also we're all focused on selling that first book. If we get to the second, no matter how old you are, it's it's not a miracle, but it's another hill to climb. We're really looking at that first book. We got to sell the first book. We got to sell book one before we sell book two. Maybe if you are 85, you're not going to get a 12 book deal, but also nobody gets 12 book deals.
Right. Well, and James Mitchell, I think James Mitchell didn't start getting publishing until he was in his 60s, and he ended up cranking out those tomes and quite a few of them before he ever uh, entered immortality. So myth number four is you have to write to trends.
Yes, I get whenever I do a Q&A or take questions from readers on my newsletter, I get a lot of like, what's hot now? Or like, is romantasy still a thing? Or, what if my vampire is sparkly? Is that still a trend? And I kind of throw my hands up and say, I don't know. And it's not that I don't know what the trends are, but the trends are irrelevant for a book that's not written. Because by the time you get finished with a book, a full manuscript, especially for novels, um, that trend will be over because unless it takes you 2 weeks to write a book, which I think John Scalzi said that he did on the internet today, but that's John Scalzi, and more power to him. But you can't write fast enough to meet a trend for a book that is on the shelf today because that book was sold 1 or 2 years ago and written up to 5 years ago. And you're just always going to be behind. Plus, I'm not buying for the market that is selling in 2026. I'm buying for the market that will be selling in 2028 and 29 and 30 and on. Because that's the that's the production schedule of book publishing. So while I think that you can ask smart questions about trends that are ongoing and whether that publishing professional thinks they still have juice, romantasy, I think, is on the downturn, in terms of just what readers want to read. So I would not go, if I was a writer looking for a project, I wouldn't go, oh, I'm going to write a romantasy and cash in. That would, I don't think, be a smart choice. But also I'm going to cash in on a trend thought process doesn't actually work. I've just never seen it work. I think you should just write the book you want to write.
Yeah, yes. Well, let's go to myth number 5. Your book has to earn out to get another book deal.
Yeah, so the word earn out means earning back the advance you got from the publisher in sales. And so when you get a book deal, that number we talk about is your advance, and they are literally advancing you future money that you would earn when the book sells. And so when your book goes on sale, all the different formats and including subrights like translation rights or um, audiobooks or all the different formats all go into a pot, and that's your royalty account. And when it fills up to meet the number of your advance, say if it was like $10,000, then after that you get royalties, and you have earned out when you get royalties. And so I've commonly heard people say, well, if I didn't earn out, they're never going to give me another book deal. And if you don't earn out by a very large margin, as in you got $1 million and you made back three, then that is not going to look good for your career longevity. But we're not we're not necessarily looking at how much money you don't owe the publisher that money. They took a
Hmm.
financial risk on you. And so can it be a calculation in thinking about your next deal? Yes, but it's not an automatic no go. If you got $1 million and you did not sell very well, you're not going to get $1 million again. But that's just business. You know,
And we used to
they
see these huge advances back in the day. Those are a thing of the past. It seems that people don't get $1 million advances anymore, except very rare exceptions. Would that be right, Kate?
Mm, I mean, yeah, I mean, yes.
I mean, not counting I mean, Stephen King gets a bunch of upfront money, but I mean,
There's a
he.
yeah, there's always a big deal announced in Publishers Lunch or Publishers Marketplace. Somebody is always throwing down a big deal. Jeff Vandermeer just got another big deal in science fiction from FSG. There's always somebody, and that's good. We want that, but because that means the publisher thinks that this person's books are going to sell a lot of copies, and anybody selling a lot of copies is, I think, that the tide that rises all boats. So. Um, I think that Publishers Marketplace has had some recent reporting on the kind of the fluctuation in deals, and I can't remember off the top of my head. Um, but it's always perception more than fact in terms of who's getting a big deal and is anybody getting a big deal, and it just depends so widely in publishing what kind of like what genre and audience you're talking about.
So turning to your book, one of the things that struck me, check me on this, but my recollection is you really kind of tell people don't stress so much about the query letter. The query letter is important, but it's not a kind of check every box thing necessarily. Talk a little bit about the query letter and what really grabs your attention in a query letter? Is it kind of the summary of the actual novel, or is it are there some other factors that you're looking for?
Yeah, I really want to know what happens in the book. Or if it's nonfiction, what's the promise to the reader and how are you going to fulfill it? Are you going to teach me how to do X, Y, and Z in four simple steps? Or are you going to tell me this amazing story of your triumph over adversity? Or are you going to tell me the story about this dragon versus that dragon and you know, evil doesn't prevail? I need to know what happens in your book because that's how we talk about books to people in our everyday lives, not just me talking to editors. When you've read a really good book, you say, "Oh my gosh." And then when this happened, I couldn't believe it. And there was a twist and blah, blah, blah. And even with a book that is not very heavily plotted, you're still talking about what the characters did and how you felt about it, even if those motions are very, very small. So I think that's what the query letter should be focused on. And the more you talk about themes or why you wrote it or of these kind of like secondary or tertiary things, the less I'm paying attention to it. And it doesn't have to be this like bulleted list of an outline, and it doesn't have to be completely workmanlike. But people stress about every single word in a query letter, thinking that one word is going to doom their chances, and one word is not going to doom your chances. I am looking at the whole picture, and I know how to read a query letter and kind of sift through all of the hemming and hawing and anxiety and trying so hard to, kind of tap dance as hard as you can for me that I'm looking for the book in there. And so I like to tell people to stress way less about query letters because I really want them to be as simple as possible.
So you get a query letter that that strikes. Um, well, actually, let me back up a minute because some agents will ask for as few as 5 pages. Others will say 25, some say 50. How many pages do you need to read? Let's say that the premise is like, this sounds interesting. Let me take a look. And you've got there, how many pages do you ask for?
I asked for 30.
Okay, so how many pages do you have to actually read before you figure out whether a person knows what they're doing or not?
It really varies. Um, sometimes sometimes you can tell right away, but I don't just read one sentence and ditch it because like sometimes our first pages are just throat clearing. And so I'll keep going. But it really just depends on how it strikes me. And it doesn't have to, it's not necessarily is this good or not? Like we all want good books, but good is such a big word. There are so many definitions of good. And I could find an imperfectly written book that is still grammatically correct and understandable and all these things that I can't stop reading because it is amazing in these other ways. And then I can find a beautifully written book that I don't want to keep reading for other reasons that are not keeping my attention. So it's a balance between both of those things. And we've all read books that we know are less artfully done, but loved tearing through, and other books that we know are beautiful but struggle through. And, it's a toss-up. We all read books, different kinds of books at different points in our days, even our weeks. So I think there's a lot of room for both.
I remember with the Confederacy of Dunces, it was
Hmm.
Robert Gottlieb, I believe, who said, it's a beautifully written, funny book that doesn't say anything. But he
Yeah.
did eventually get it published, and it was celebrated, and it did win an award. It won it posthumously, and that was a little bit controversial, I think, at the time. But yeah, I think that, in fact, I just saw an article recently I read that um, it was an author who said, I spent so much time trying to write beautiful sentences that I didn't really pay attention to really driving the story forward. And that really cost me. Eventually, along the way, though, the moral of the story was she figured that out through feedback from agents and editors and ended up getting published because she started paying more attention to the story and still concentrating on writing it beautifully, of course. But there was that. So you get your 30 pages. You really like what you see. You like the concept. You like the writing. You think this person's got something going. You ask for the manuscript. And boom, it's still good, really good. You want to sign them. Is that always a written agreement? I mean, I think the standard is what, 15% for book sales, 20% on movie rights or international sales, it might be. Clarify that for us. But is it always, you always do a written contract? Is that right? Or a written
Our
agreement?
agency does a written agency agreement, and really just outlines all the things we'll do for you and any expectations that we have for you, which is, you know, talk to us. And it does stipulate the financial percentages. You're right, it's 15% domestic, 20 to 21% foreign, depending on the makeup of co-agents that we use. And it can differ from territory to territory, and then 20% for film rights. And that's industry standard. It's also non-negotiable. I definitely have had someone say, okay, well, I'll give you 40% if you'll be my agent. And first of all, I cannot do that uh, for many reasons. And second, I won't do that. And also as people have asked to try to negotiate me down, and I also cannot do that.
Yeah, that stuff is set in stone. Okay. So,
Mhm.
have you had the experience of turning down a novel that another agent picked up and it turned out to be a big hit?
My biggest regret is that Celeste Ng queried me for her first novel a bajillion years ago, and I did not recognize its genius and passed on it. And then, of course, she went on to write half a dozen fantastic books. And we're friendly on the internet, so I actually don't beat myself up for those things because every agent has that story. I'm gonna have another one in the future. And then just I wasn't the person who saw the light, and so that was not my client to have, and they find someone else, and so I don't, how many people rejected the Beatles? It's fine.
Right.
Life goes
Yeah,
on.
it happens. And what, before Humphrey Bogart, somebody else was offered Casablanca, turned it down, and oops, that was a bad one.
Yeah.
Um, Hey, this might be another myth, but what about the author out there who is thinking, hey, I got 150,000 social media followers, so that's going to really help carry the day. Is that something you look for? Does that matter to you?
It depends on the genre. In nonfiction, a follower base matters, but it's not a specific number because I've had really successful books for people who've had 30,000 followers on a platform. And I've had very unsuccessful books for people who've had 1 million followers on a platform. So follower counts on any of the social media platforms do not equal book sales. I'd say we probably have a 1 or 2% return rate on that kind of thing, where 1 or 2% of your followers will buy your book. And then it also matters what platform you're on and who is there and what you're writing about. Because if you have a huge, let's say, Instagram following and you're writing about, really detailed economic policy, but not on Instagram, that's not going to help your big, juicy nonfiction book about economic policy. Or if you are in the cooking space and you're not on Instagram or TikTok, that can be a big deterrent because that's where a lot of the market is looking at that content. So, and then and for kids, it's completely different because for everything under young adult, you're not marketing to the reader. You're marketing to parents and librarians. And so where are parents and librarians? So it really depends on whose eyeballs you want on your work, where they are and where you are. And like everything tied together creates the platform. When I got my book deal for Right Through It, I have a modest social media platform. I have at the time I only had maybe 17,000 subscribers to my newsletter. Twitter was still a thing. I had maybe 30,000 followers there. I have still to this day do not have that many Instagram followers. I'm not on TikTok. And I still got a book deal because I speak frequently to writers and outlets like this. I have lots of contacts in media and professional colleagues and things like that to help promote the book. I know where I can pitch things like in Writer's Digest to support the book. And I had the newsletter already queued up. So all of those things together created a platform, not just I have 150,000 followers on Instagram, which was not true for me anyway.
So when you're representing a writer, you think this is very promising. You take it to the editors. Editors, to your surprise, one after another turns it down. Maybe liked it, but said it doesn't quite work for us, or that pipeline's already filled by a different author. How much time do you give it? I mean, I've heard of agents representing authors for several years before anything happens, but what is kind of the and I don't know if you actually have a very specific answer to this, but there must be times when at some point you say, I did the best I could with this. You better find another agent because I wasn't able to make contact on it.
Yeah, it's definitely not a passage of time thing. It's really just a checking in with the author, seeing what they're working on next, seeing if I feel like I can do bring something to the table to help them because I don't want to get in their way. If I'm not connecting with what they're doing, or then I'm not the right advocate for their work, and I want to get out of the way. So it's not a factor of how many books we do or how many months it takes or this kind of a number. It's not a number, it's more of a feeling and a conversation between me and an author. I would say that the rejection is the norm. Like I'm expecting the rejection from the editor, not because I don't think it's going to sell, but we will get more rejections than offers for books.
Hmm.
That is just statistically how it happens. And so I'm really holding out for that one or two or maybe three, if we're really lucky, yeses um, in the field, so that we can then hopefully, broker that into a deal.
So what does your typical workday look like? How would I mean, if you were drawing a pie chart, what are some of the major pieces of that pie that kind of dominate your day?
Uh, yeah, definitely a lot of email. I spent most of the day on email, just reading contracts, returning messages, updating people on submissions, answering questions, just the general flow of information that has to go back and forth between editors and me and my authors and different people in the process. Um, I have on my to-do list today to read for 2 hours so I can get through a manuscript this week. I have not yet to do that 2 hours of reading, and I hopefully will get to do that this evening. I also spent several hours reading a 35-page contract that is really slow going because, of course, the language is very contracty, and I had to keep kind of smacking my cheeks to stay awake. But um, I know it very well too, so it's like I could almost recite these contracts, but I have to look at every word to make sure that it is appropriate for my client and this book, and I can't just rubber stamp it and be like, yeah, it's fine. Um, and I wrote my newsletter today. And I went to yoga today. I have a very flexible schedule, so I can pick up and do something that is specifically for me in my day and work around it. So I'm very
Yes.
lucky that way.
Yes. What is the most rewarding part of your job? Is there something that look, if I had it my way, this is the activity that would dominate my day?
Well, I mean, obviously, like seeing numbers in emails from editors, like that is a very fun part to be like fielding offers and to getting to call clients and say, "Hey, guess what?" But today I got to send a text message to a client today to tell her that her book earned out, and she was getting a royalty check after more than 10 years. And
Wow.
that's just so satisfying. That means that like a certain, even small number of people found this book every year and we pushed the ball yard by yard across the field and across the line. So that is very gratifying for me.
Mhm.
And also I get to write, I'm supposed to write some notes to a client on a novel that I've read several times and I really love, and we're really close to the end, and I want to give some feedback. And it's hard to put sometimes feelings into words or some kind of ineffable qualities. Be like, I feel like the middle is doing a thing, but it's gratifying to kind of peel back the layers of a novel and help an author um, make it its best version.
Hmm. Hmm. Now we all hear about the ungodly number of submissions that literary agencies receive. Uh, Typically, how many do you receive in a week or a month, or the agency?
I don't know on the agency as a whole. We don't really track it as a whole. I probably receive anywhere from 500 to 700 a month.
Wow, that is a lot.
Yep.
Um, and do you actually read? I see a lot of agents out there who say not accepting queries at this point. Do you kind of turn the spigot off at times, or do you always keep
Yeah.
it open and give everything a look?
I give everything a look. I'm currently closed to submissions because I got to a point where I had over 5,000 in my query inbox on Query Tracker. And that number just makes me want to curl up in a ball. Because I know that there are 5,000 people on the other end of it waiting for an answer. And I know what that waiting feels like. And it's the worst. I also have, been an agent for 20 years and I don't have 100 open spots on my list. So I'm very selective, very, very selective. Um, Not because I don't see deserving manuscripts, but because I only have so many hours in the day to work one-on-one with a writer. Um, and so it's a tough game. It's a tough game.
What would you identify as the most common mistakes that aspiring authors make?
They query too soon. They finish their book, they think it's perfect, they read it once or twice, and say, "Oh, I'm sure that, an editor will help me fix that middle that doesn't make any sense." Um, and they want to get to the next stage. They want to have the exciting experiences of querying and getting the offer letter, and everyone has fantasies of sending the query at 6 p.m. and getting an offer by 8 a.m. the next morning. And like, I am not immune to these kind of fanciful publishing dreams. But impatience is the worst possible motivator for any publishing decision or writing decision. If you wave your hands in front of the story and be like, I'm sure somebody will figure that out. That's the point at which I will say no as an agent because um, I don't have the resources to help you figure it out. Like I don't have as much time to help you one-on-one edit a manuscript the way that I did, 15 years ago. Other agents may, and that is fine. But if you wanted a chance to work with me, you would have needed to edit your book, even if that took another year. And that's normal and fine. And unexperienced writers want to roll over and die when I say that because they're like, "What do you mean? I just took 2 years to write this. I have to wait another year." I'm like, "No, you don't have to wait another year. You have to teach yourself how to edit your own work, and that might take a year."
Hmm. The experience I have repeatedly, Kate, is I'll get a novel and the first 25 or 50 pages is a celebration, just great writing. Then it just slumps. And I was just complaining. Well, I probably complained about this to my wife a few different times that I feel like those early pages they really write for the agent and the editor to really grab their attention is tremendous writing, and then they run out of gas. Now, I don't know if it's that what I suspect is true or that they have to kind of settle into the plot or the narrative and they can't be as poetic at that point. I mean, what do you have any thoughts about that?
I think I don't think that there's anything specific about those pages and the editor and the agent and like everybody is like, well, this is fine because there are so many people working on a book and working on every single page that again, even the professionals in the room are not waving their hands, being like, the reader won't care. We know the reader will care, and the way that the consequences of that is that you will love the beginning of the book and then you won't finish it and then you won't tell your friend to read it because you didn't finish it or you'll tell them, hey, it was really great in the beginning but the ending really fell off, and that is the death knell of word of mouth marketing. And so we all in the process want the book to be its strongest all the way through and to be a very satisfying read, whether you agreed with the twists or who done it or whatever the material facts of the story. I think that in a narrative sense, that once you've gotten through the beginning of a story where you've dragged the reader in, there's a natural kind of pause where you have to re regroup and be like, okay, you know, the vampires are here. Now what do we do? Or whatever. And that's a hard beat in storytelling. And some people are better at it than others. And some people will say, okay, well, the reader is so invested in these vampires that they're gonna like over it and then keep going. And maybe they won't. In this case, for you, they didn't. So I think that it's a real storytelling trap, and some people fall into it.
Mm. How much weight do you give to writing quality versus storytelling? Because I see a lot of novels out there, especially the best-selling novels. They tend to be very plotted, very, very strong plotting, and they tell a story that's captivating, but not necessarily, I mean, the language isn't necessarily Shakespearean.
Well, we all read for different things, and the some of the best-selling genres in publishing are plot heavy because those are entertaining books to read and beautiful. Lots of books that we would call genre, science fiction, fantasy, mystery, romance, thriller, all of that are beautiful works of art. But the reader who is reading for volume is reading for the story. But
Hmm.
they will put down books that they don't like the voice or they don't trust the narrative or they don't like they don't jive with the author and they'll put it away and they'll find another one. And I think that's just true across the board. Um, the publishing machine, the retail industry of publishing sells more genre books than literary books. And the common assumptions are that genre books are less artful than literary books. And it's not true, but it is the assumption. And you can point to examples on both sides. And I think that the readers who don't gravitate towards plot-driven books just don't want that kind of book, or they haven't found the one they like, or they haven't
Hmm.
found the genre that they like. And that's fine. And everybody's got an opinion. Um, and there are really, really poorly written literary novels, and there are really, really beautiful written genre novels, and vice versa. And I also think that as an agent, I can see beautiful writing, but if I personally do not, if, like I as a reader am not drawn to turn the page, then nobody else will, and I can't sell that book.
Hmm. Now, you are not agented E.L. James, are you?
No,
No.
no.
Okay. I wanted to ask because I look at her, 50 Shades of Grey as, wow, good concept. I thought the writing was very vapid, but the concept really seemed to carry it. And I guess she got into subject matter that particularly women were really lit up to. So, I mean, and it's a big book. It's a big book, and but it seems like the concept kind of carried it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it was scintillating and splashy and a little bit new to some readers and exciting and you could clutch your pearls or whatever you wanted to do about it and that just gave people something to talk about and I think it's fantastic. I think I didn't read 50 Shades of Grey. I would maybe one day if I felt like it. I have nothing against it. I read a lot of other romance. But I kind of don't care you know, whether it's if people think it's poorly written or well written, because people read it. And if all of those people read one more book, like that's how we keep publishing alive. So I really don't, it doesn't bother me. I don't, I'm not, I, I just don't, I kind of, it's not that I don't care about the written word, but if somebody really likes a book and I don't think it's well written, okay, that's fine.
right. Yep. Well, everybody's got different tastes. Yeah. I mean,
Mm.
my wife loves a heavily plotted book. She wants narration. Anytime I recommend a book to her, it's kind of like, this isn't for me. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
So,
I'm honestly, my husband and I are like that too. We more than ever recently have overlapped in the books that we both like. But he's also started reading more genre, and I've started reading a little more kind of quiet, nice literary novels that he likes. Um, but you just everybody gets to read what they like. And if you haven't found the thing that you like yet, go talk to a librarian. They'll tell you.
You mentioned genres, you mentioned romance, and I did have an academic on the podcast a few months ago who had written an article for a news outlet called The Conversation and about how romance is so dominant in terms of book sales. I think that she said it was, a quarter of all books are romance novels, and was a big romance reader herself. There is, I mean, the person who's trying to be successful, like I want to write, but I also want to be financially successful. I can see them gravitating towards a genre, just feeling that, particularly with romance, I think it seems that a person who's a romance fancier will read maybe dozens of books a year, romance books a year. I suppose that the same is probably true for detective novels to a lesser extent, and maybe sci-fi to a lesser extent, but romance really dominates. Um, how do you, as an agent, when something like that comes across your desk, a romance novel? I mean, do you actually? I didn't read what you're looking for. I know you're closed to queries right now, but I don't know what you're looking for right now. What your typical readout is? Is romance one of the categories you're looking for?
Of course. Why wouldn't it be?
Well, it
I
would
mean,
be
there are
because it's such a
plenty.
huge seller.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are plenty of agents who don't do romance, and romance is a humongous genre in publishing. And there are so many different flavors of romance. And some are more popular than others, or more or viable than others at different given times. There was that time when everything was a vampire novel, was the Charlene Harris days when it was called paranormal romance. And now we have romantasy, which is kind of the same thing, but a slightly different flavor. There's contemporary romance, which have all the kind of candy colored covers that has been popular for many years. People used to call it chick lit. Now it's just contemporary romance. There's Regency romance, there's historical romance, there's queer romance, there's sapphic, there's everything under the sun has its
Hmm.
own little niche. And so as a reader, and well, as an agent, I don't just represent books that I like. Personally, as Kate, I like a bunch of different kinds of books. There are books that I think are good and readers would like that I don't have to personally like to sell. And that comes into play a lot more as my clients and as a relationship um, matures, because I don't know what they're going to write next. And I don't tell my clients what to write next. If we talk about it, we can strategize and say, well, I wouldn't focus on that right now. What about this idea? But I don't know what's going to sell because I don't have a crystal ball. I can just make educated guesses, just like any other agent or editor out there. And so we'll strategize as much as we can, but I really want my clients to write the book that they can't stop thinking about, because there's something sticky in that idea that is carrying them through the pages, and which if they put it on the page in the most compelling way, then it will carry me through the pages, and then I can pass that excitement down the whole line, from editor to marketing person to salesperson to store owner to bookseller to reader, and then to the reader's friends.
Hmm.
So I'm looking for that kind of excitement. But there are also areas of the world that I just know more about. In the beginning of my career, I started selling a lot of craft books, so sewing, knitting, crochet, that kind of thing, because I personally knew a lot about it. I'm a very much a jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to being crafty, but I'm crafty and I enjoy it. And there was an up and coming kind of genre of knitting books, and this was and other crafts. And I found that niche that I could get in there and help writers find publishers, because I knew what I was talking about. Because if you don't know that a knitting book should not have crochet patterns in it, then you're lost. And
Hmm.
people make that mistake. So I take all of these things together, my personal interests, my viewpoint on the market, my personal expertise, and then use that to go out into the world to try to properly represent authors the best I can. I really, really, really like historical novels, both I would say women's fiction, historical or historical romance. I don't want every book about World War II, but I personally read a lot of historicals, and there's been a lot of talk in the last 5 years about how historicals are not doing very well, and I kind of don't care. I personally read them, and when I see one in the world and in my query inbox that I like, that I think I can sell, I'm going to go try it out because it won't be forever that nobody wants historical novels. It'll all cycle back.
Hmm. This might be a stereotype, but there's a lot of writers who I'm sure are insecure and
100%
require,
all of them.
yeah, and a lot of hand-holding probably. I mean, how much of your job involves hand-holding with authors? And I suspect maybe you get to a point with certain authors where it's kind of like, look, I can't really do this. You need to trust the process. You need to get to work and so on. Um, how do I don't know that you have a psychology degree or anything. I don't think you do, but you probably
No.
have an honorary one in dealing with as many authors as you do.
I think it helps that I am a writer as well. And I think that in publishing my books, like I've learned how to even be a better agent to my authors because I personally send my agent borderline unhinged emails. And I mean, not really. I have seen worse from my own clients, but I have definitely sent an email to Michael Barrett, my agent, being like, I'm worried about this thing. Can you please tell me to stop worrying about it? Because I know it's not actually a big deal. But I just need him to tell me to stop worrying about it. And we all need that kind of reassurance. And, you know, I know from just being on the inside as a writer my whole life, I know what they're thinking. And sometimes I can get ahead of it. And sometimes an author will surprise me. But I think it's different with each one of my clients because everybody needs something a little bit different. And some people want a little bit different. Some people want a lot of hand holding or need it, and they'll tell me, or I can kind of guess. Um, but we just navigate it as it comes. And I don't have a problem being like, hey, friend, you need to sit down with this and think about it, or, as kindly as possible. I haven't ever gotten to the point where I had to be like, don't email me anymore. Luckily. No, I've never had to go too far and be like, do you need me to call someone for you? Um, luckily. But sometimes, I have clients who will text me and be like, I just really need you to tell me to stop freaking out about this. And I'd be like, give me a call. Let's go. And that's fine.
What makes for a really productive author-agent relationships? What are you looking for? What really works for you and for an author in terms of what kind of relationship it is and how you interact?
Open communication. I cannot fix a problem that I don't know exists. I cannot help you with these feelings of anxieties, you being an author, with these feelings of anxiety, unless I know you are anxious. And if I can't tell that from your vague social media posts or whatever, then you need to tell me. And I will ask, I check in with my clients sometimes and be like, hey, how's it going? If I have a little premonition that I think they need a little a kind word or check-in or something. But I don't always catch that because people don't always put their lives out where it can be seen. So, or if someone's having a really hard time with edits with their editor and I have not been CC'd on these emails, I cannot step in unless I know what's going on. And also, I want to return that forthrightness with my clients to be like, if I'm seeing bad news coming down the line, I'm gonna reach out and be like, hey, listen, we need to prepare for something. Also, I don't always see what's coming. Publishers can make silly decisions, but um, if any of my clients are ever afraid to talk to me about something, then I'm not doing my job. And if I am afraid to talk to my clients about something, I'm not doing my job well. It is my job to have the hard conversations, and I just have to do it. And after all these years, I'm a little bit less squeamish of it, but it's still not fun.
Hmm.
So
Right.
that's just the job.
So there's some lucky authors out there who they mail their manuscript out or their query letter and their sample pages, and they end up with a few different agents that are interested that they want to do a deal with them. And I guess that leads to what a bit I don't know if you call it a bidding process in the business,
We call it the beauty contest.
the beauty contest. So if you were advising an author who's in that situation, a lucky person, What are the factors? What would you point to saying, look, you're going to get three different offers here from people. Here's what you really need to focus on. Is it strictly somebody who's going to, well, I guess the deals are, what's the differentiator between the offers on a beauty contest? What would you be telling an author to be looking for?
First and foremost, I would look for the agent's experience and or their support. So you don't automatically go with the agent who's been the agent the longest. That does not mean they're the perfect agent for you or the right agent for you. It is often very beneficial to go with a newer agent, a new to the business agent, if they have specific support in their agency. And maybe they're remote, that's okay, that's fine, but they need to be mentored specifically by um, a, a more experienced agent. And I would say if you are get an offer from somebody who set up their practice 6 months ago and have never worked in publishing and maybe authored a couple books and then they say no, they're an agent, I would say no. That person does not have enough experience, even though they might talk a big game. Um, the way we learn how to be agents is an apprenticeship. I learned what contracts should look like by sitting on the office couch with Howard Morhaim, looking page by page, clause by clause, and learning how the contract should look. And that is the way I became the agent I am today. So I'd say first and foremost, it's experience or mentorship. And then second, I think it's vibes. If you don't feel comfortable talking to that person outside of the normal kind of anxiety of talking to someone that is, maybe will unlock doors for you or is impressive to you or feels like an authority, like we're all get a little nervous there. But if you aren't feeling like you can talk to that person, then they're not going to be an effective agent to you because like I said, if my clients are scared to talk to me, then I can't do my job well. And if you are scared to talk to that agent, they are not going to be the good agent for you because they won't know what you need unless you get over that fear. You also want to make sure that you both kind of see the novel the same way. Because if an agent is coming in and saying, I can get you $1 billion for this book, all you have to do is change the dinosaurs to trucks or whatever. And if you don't want your book to have trucks in it, then you should not work with that agent. And if an agent is citing numbers to you and saying, I promise you this book deal, just absolutely run. No agent should promise you numbers because they do not have control over those numbers. I cannot make a publisher give me a specific dollar amount. Um, and if an agent ever asks you for money, run. They are not a
Oh
credible
yeah,
agent.
they're
And they're,
scammers.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the money never flows from the author to the agent. It always flows from the publisher to the agent to the author.
Interesting. So, some of the research that we've read lately that's been really discouraging for authors and I'm sure for publishing companies is that the number of people who read for pleasure has plummeted here in the United States. And I think that's more broadly than that. There's so many distractions now. There's video and social media and virtual reality, augmented reality, on and on. What is the future of reading? Does your agency, does the publishing business in general pay a lot of attention to this? And do you have any insights as to how they feel about whether reading is still good and brisk or whether there'll be an eventual resurgence?
I think this is probably my third news cycle of the book is dead, long live the book. It comes and goes. When ebooks came around, everybody was like, oh, the book is dead. I think when radio came out, they said the book was dead.
Mhm.
I don't believe it. I'm sure that there are actually these studies. I haven't read the articles, but the studies that say, oh, this and that. And I have a 10-year-old and I do find it can be a struggle to I can't make them read because then they'll hate it. So I don't, we talk about books the way we talk about all other media. And so I'm sure there are numbers. There's always numbers, but the book is a perfect technology. It's relatively expensive or widely available in libraries. It always works. It's always on.
It's portable.
It's portable. Everybody knows how to use it. Um, it's not going anywhere. We do have to fight. I think we have to fight the algorithmic companies more than anything else because they're just literally sucking us into our phones. Um, but I have a lot of
And the
excitement and
book can
faith.
be on the phone. The book can be on the phone
Yeah,
as well. Like
true.
when like your novel is on my or your book is on my phone, and that's where I listen to it
Absolutely.
from.
I read ebooks all the time and I listen to audiobooks all the time. And those are reading. Like that is reading. But if if it is easier, if you're at a slow point in a book and you're like, oh, I'll just go check Twitter or Blue Sky, whatever. Um, like we have to combat that as writers and publishing people. And I think that
Hmm.
that is also one of the ways that it, maybe has turned to focus to plot-driven books because we can't let you put it down. And
Right.
that it does affect things in small ways, but like we've had books for, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of years. I can't tell you.
Right. Well,
I
the
don't know.
Gutenberg, yeah,
Yeah.
dating back to the Gutenberg, that
Maybe
really
not
got us
100,000
going.
years, but yeah.
Um, one of the really positive trends I see is so many people watch streaming series and movies. Of course, it's amazing how many of the series on streaming platforms are based on novels. It seems like authors have never had it better. Fiction writers have never had it better in terms of getting something onto the screen, having their book repurposed um, for either the silver screen or the television.
Yeah, I mean, it's really worked out well for Homer and the Odyssey. Like he's
Yes.
been super lucky. No, but I agree. But what I think is a factor there that is a little bit different than previous years is that Hollywood is looking for a sure thing. And so they want to make shows out and movies out of the best selling things, the highest selling things, so that they can say to their investors, X bajillion people read this book, so X bajillion people are even going to watch this movie. And that's why we see a lot of repackaged and repurposed and remakes. Here's a brand new live action Moana, like here, whatever it is, it's because the economy is so precarious in different ways, and because everyone is fighting for the few extra dollars that everybody has right now. They want as much assurance that they're going to get their investment back. And so books have data behind them that says, hey, this sold X number of copies, ergo, instead of an original screenplay that has no data behind it, that is a little less, it's not a sure thing. But then you look at
Hmm.
Widow's Bay, which was a fantastic TV show. I absolutely loved it. And that was an original screenplay that somebody wrote on spec for Parks and Rec.
Hmm.
And I think that's my favorite show of the year.
Hmm.
So there's always going to be one, and I saw the Odyssey and I see most of the big book movies. But it's tough. It's tough. I think fewer things are actually getting made. Lots of things get optioned, but I think very few things are actually getting made, and it's been tougher in the last maybe 4 or 5 years to
Hmm.
get something to actually hit the screen.
Before I let you go, Kate, I did want to ask you about artificial intelligence, AI. As a magazine editor, I use it every day. I can take a white paper from some company, feed it in there, and tell it to write a magazine style article and Associated Press style, and it flubs it once in a while. But it's amazing how good it has become, and we're only scratching the surface. But I also know that agents like you and publishing companies, and I've even seen it where they say we don't want AI written stuff. We want you to assure us that you are actually the author. This isn't a bunch of stuff spit out by AI. Um, what about AI? Do you use it yourself to help streamline your job? And
Absolutely
what
not.
about you don't?
No, I have a zero AI policy. I don't use it. I don't like it. I don't think it does good work. I have to
Hmm.
disagree with you greatly. I would not want to read a publication that spit out an article from a white paper. AI is trained on stolen copyright and copyrighted works. So even if, like, I'm not sure you had the right to put that into AI and spit it out. But I
Oh,
don't know the particulars of what
I
you're
get
doing.
what I do is I send it to them and then they, yeah,
Oh,
it's all, the thing
that's
is that
good.
one of the things I notice is that when it comes to just journalistic writing, it does much better than, but if you ask it to write a story, because I've experimented with that a little bit, uh, it doesn't write good fiction, but it can take information and turn it into a good, magazine story or newspaper story.
Well, I mean,
It always needs to be reviewed and fact checked and revised.
well,
But obviously,
I'll
you're not
admit,
looking for an AI bot to be
yeah.
producing the novels that you're representing.
No, I've never used it to generate anything fictitious and honestly nonfiction either. I will admit here that I have used it once. I wanted Claude to write me basically posts to promote my newsletter. And it took me 3 times as long to get the prompt right, which maybe with experience I would get better at that, to have it right, like, oh, today on Agents and Books, blah, 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 and over 50% of the posts it wrote for me were completely fabricated with bad links that I didn't write about. And they were all the same format and they all had these bunches of emojis in them. And I found it worthless. So,
Terrible.
I don't use it. I don't want my clients to use it. I don't think you should use it for even like grammar checking. I mean, spell check is a thing that you could make it, but I would not use generative AI in any way. And I do think that the bubble's going to burst. The sameness of it all is becoming more evident every day because it can only do this average thing. And so it's always going to spit out the average sounding material. And that sounds good now because we're not so used to it. But I think hopefully any minute now, the readers will know and then it'll just tune out completely. People be like, ugh, that's not real.
Right.
Hopefully.
Right. My guest has been Kate McKean, literary agent at the Howard Morhaim Literary Agency. You can learn more about Kate at her website. If you look in the episode notes, I have her URL there. I also have a link to her book. Um, and again, that title of her book is Right Through It, Write as in WRITE, Right Through It, An Insider's Guide to Publishing in the Creative Life. And as I said earlier, just full of great information. Kate, thanks a million for coming on the program. I really learned a lot from you
Right.
and from your book.
Thanks so much for having me.